Today on Trad Takes, I admit that I was wrong about JD Vance. And did Joe Biden become a master mason? All this and more on Trad Takes. Welcome to episode 5 of Trad Takes, the I Don't Really Care Margaret edition. As always, we are hosted by the Traditionalists, and I'm Eric Kosovich. Thank you for joining me this week. If you like what you hear, please like this video, share it, and subscribe to the Traditionalists, making sure to ring that bell. We'll start off today like we do every week by reading my favorite comment on last week's video. And I didn't really want to, but I have to pick the one from Fran Geckel 9016. Fran says, "Right now, society is run by whoever makes the best memes and the best fast food chicken. Prove me wrong." Well, I sort of agree with you, Fran, that the best memes do seem to run the world. We look at the JD Vance memes that you can see on the title slide of this video. And that shows you what's going on there. As far as the best fast food chicken, I don't know about that. Does Popeyes rule the world? I have to think about that one. Thank you, Fran. There's another good one, so I'm going to read a second one. But Janet R5693, talking about states, we were talking about Colorado versus Ohio. Janet says, "The greatest is Kansas, second only to the state of grace." I'll agree with you on the state of grace, Janet, but I have to disagree on the Kansas thing. Here in the Front Range in Colorado, we derogatorily call eastern Colorado Kansas. So I appreciate the comment, Janet, and I appreciate the loyalty and patriotism for the state you come from, which I assume is Kansas. But I reserve the right to make just as much fun of Kansas as I do of Ohio. Thanks, everyone, for the comments, and keep them coming. I obviously appreciate the comments that are like, "Hey, good job, liked the take," or even the comments along the lines of just a thumbs up or folded hands. Those are great, too. But if you want to influence next week's show and want to talk about something interesting or controversial, definitely don't hold back those comments also. I promise you won't hurt my feelings. And, there may be topics, even if you agree with me on my show, there may be topics that I don't talk about that you want to hear my take on, or you want to hear my opinion on for whatever reason. So feel free to put those in too. Those will be much more likely to get read than even the very nice and very supportive thumbs up, folded hands, great show type comments. So feedback for y'all. JD Vance, a week or so ago, went on Face the Nation, which is hosted by Margaret Brennan. And as he did in his one and only vice presidential debate with Tim Walz, he figuratively committed murder on live TV. His intelligence, his charisma, and his mastery of not only the subjects at hand, but also the way to effectively communicate them, was second to none. The highlight of the interview, and what became the meme that titles this show and, according to Fran, rules the world, is when Margaret Brennan started defending illegal immigration by saying that a specific terrorist who was known to come into the U.S. illegally might not have been radicalized until after he had illegally entered the United States. And Vance replied to this, frankly, stupid point by saying, "I don't really care, Margaret." And now he has added to his legendary set of anti-woke memes. I highly suggest anyone who hasn't seen the whole interview to look it up and watch it through. Not only is it a masterclass by JD Vance, but it's also just enjoyable and fun to watch as someone who has been on this side of the political reality for so long. Anyway, this gained so much traction and I so thoroughly enjoyed the interview that I wanted to formally take a step back and admit how far I've come on JD Vance over the past few months. I went back through my text message history and found a text that I sent my dad and brother when Trump picked Vance as VP. I'm going to quote myself here, which seems very self-important, but I said, quote, "He's okay. He used to hate Trump back in 2016, but then says Trump proved him wrong while in office. Now a big fan. He's Catholic. I don't like him as much as DeSantis or Cruz, but he's fine, I think." End quote. That was a very lukewarm reaction by myself to the man who is currently America's, and particularly the right's, favorite politician. I think I was hesitant on going all in on him for a few reasons. One was just my own lack of exposure to him. Maybe in Ohio people had heard and seen more of him since he was in the race and the sitting senator. But for myself and for much of the country, I think, Vance was an unknown. And quite simply, the more I've heard and seen of him, the more I like him, which is not usually the way that it goes with politicians, especially for me. Secondly, what little I did know of him was that he was basically Trump Jr. His policies, his senatorial campaign, the way he talked, all that I thought was basically just in complete lockstep with Trump. And while that's fine to a certain extent, I thought he wouldn't add anything to the campaign. These other options, I so naively thought at the time, would bring a greater presence to the debate stage and a more traditionally conservative side to the ticket. Not only has Vance obviously proved me wrong on the debate stage, I personally don't know a single politician who would stand a chance against him. But he does appear to be more and more traditionally conservative the more I learn about him and the more I dig into him. Again, not something I'm used to with a politician. I think I was cautious because of his age. He's only a couple years older than myself, and I thought that might be a liability in a political world that appeared at the time to be dominated by geriatrics. And again, in hindsight, this was not only not a liability, it was an asset, a breath of fresh air for a country that was sick of the same old thing, no pun intended. Finally, I was concerned about the future of a post-Trump Republican Party, and I thought the Vance pick would just throw it all into complete chaos. I personally always saw Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, as the apparent heir to the throne. And I loved, and honestly still do love, that idea. I thought now with Vance as VP in 2028, we'd have a Republican civil war, DeSantis versus Vance, and it would tear the party apart. But again, with hindsight, I don't really see much ideological difference between the two. Vance might be a little more isolationist, but not much. DeSantis, I think, has an edge on fiscal responsibility and decreasing the national debt. But Vance, again, isn't far off. I think I'd take Vance on the debate stage. But DeSantis is a great leader and executive, as been seen in Florida and his history there. They're both Catholic. They're both strongly pro-life. Although Vance has had to tiptoe that line being on the Republican ticket with Trump. But yeah, so now I'm actually enthused about 2028. Not only do I think a civil war is unlikely, but honestly, a JD Vance, Ron DeSantis ticket would be the best ticket imaginable, possibly in American history. I could go on and on. All this is to say, I will readily admit when I'm wrong. I was wrong about JD Vance being an average milquetoast VP pick. I was wrong that he would be at best a neutral pick and at worst could tank the ticket. JD Vance has grown to be one of my favorite political figures, not only currently, but in my lifetime. I hope and pray he stays true to his principles, his Catholic faith, and honestly, if I'm praying for miracles, I hope he even comes to the true traditional faith, as I think a man with his intelligence can reach with the appropriate desire for the truth. And the hardest of all to admit for me, yes, Father Gecko, I'm also admitting something good about Ohio. Ohio should be very proud of this man, who will hopefully become the 48th President of the United States. I'll hold my breath for Colorado to produce one that matches. All right, let's get on to some other news here. On a positive note, I wanted to bring up the fact that, hey, we have a president, and not only a president, but a functioning, highly intelligent, and effective president. My wife sent me this article a couple days ago about a crisis that occurred and was handled within 30 minutes. Not yesterday, but the Sunday before. I'm going to read from an article she sent from Jeff Blair from National Review. I don't think we're big enough to get in trouble for just reading articles, but in case we are, I wanted to give credit. Gustavo Petro, the socialist president of Colombia, made the mistake of posing for his international audience of left-wing admirers. He is the first socialist to lead modern Colombia, and he's an ex-guerrilla to boot. By publicly refusing to accept the repatriation of Colombian illegal immigrants who were in the United States. The rubber met the road earlier today when he turned away 2 inbound flights from the U.S. filled with aliens, preventing them from landing, to prove that Trump, quote, can't treat Colombian migrants as criminals, end quote. Trump responded in a somber and measured fashion minutes later, announcing 1, a 25% tariff on all Colombian goods, to be raised to 50% after a week. 2, a complete travel ban and visa revocation of all Colombian government officials in the United States, tantamount to a diplomatic expulsion from the country. 3, sanctions on anyone and everyone in the Colombian government, as well as family members and supporters. 4, enhanced border inspections for anything and everything Colombian, whether goods or people. And 5, international banking sanctions. This is justly characterizable as the nuclear option in the diplomatic realm. Rather than preside over the immediate economic ruin of his nation, Gustavo Petro responded minutes later by apologizing and offering his own presidential airplane to help out if necessary. That is justly characterizable as kissing the ring. The article goes on to evaluate it, but I'll just give my own thoughts on this occurrence. How great is it to have a president who not only puts America first, but does it so quickly and so effectively? The title of this article was Speak Loudly and Carry a Big Stick. How great is it to have a president that not only has a big stick, but he knows exactly how and when to use it in a very effective manner. How many of you listeners heard about this story? I know I didn't. To have a commander-in-chief be able to take these type of situations, deal with them quickly, effectively, and commandingly in a way that all these other nations are now not only respectful of us, but in some ways almost a little bit scared of us, I think in a good way. It's something that's just so refreshing and so we're so unused to seeing that I'm just sort of basking in the glory of it all. Trump will have his missteps. Certainly on foreign policy, he'll have his missteps, but for the time being, just enjoy it as I am enjoying it. And thank you, Gustavo Petro, for helping us to ship your illegal immigrants back to your country. I hope they enjoy the personal presidential airplane ride. Next on the docket, we have Elon Musk being accused of making Nazi hand gestures. I think probably everyone has seen this. There's stills of him holding his hand out, and of course the legacy media is out there saying, well, see, he's a Nazi, we told you. There's also images out there of all of these liberal elites also making that same hand gesture. Turns out that raising your arm occasionally happens. What I think is worth talking about here, we don't need to talk about the obvious bias or the fact that Musk is obviously not a Nazi. He was just doing some weird, excited hand gestures, and if you catch them at the right time, they look like a Nazi salute. But the point I would like to make is that things like a Nazi salute are meaningless apart from the actions that are attached to it. Raising one's arm at a 45-degree angle does not make you evil. Raising your arm at a 45-degree angle to pledge allegiance to a group that murdered millions of Jews, and more than just that, let's be honest, they murdered Catholics and they did all sorts of terrible, terrible things. That's evil. It's a point that seems so dumb it doesn't even have to be made, but let's make it. You're not accidentally a Nazi. You're not accidentally a racist. You are only a racist or a Nazi if you believe and want to be a racist or a Nazi and do the things that go along with those groups. Being opposed to DEI does not make you a racist any more than raising your hand makes you a Nazi. Believing in a strong southern border does not make you a racist any more than wearing boots makes you a Nazi. I could go on and on. What I find is amazing is that the left and the media, who are not all stupid people, they're not all dumb people, but the fact that they continue to use these attacks, these dumb, uneducated, just simply transparent attacks, it's astounding to me. These are adults that think this is a good argument. And I guess we can thank them. I think that is one of the major reasons Trump and the Republicans won this past election. So y'all keep it up. Keep calling Musk and Trump Nazis and racists. Keep calling half the country bigots. Go for it. We'll see how that works out for you. Since I'm hitting all the hot topics, let's go with another one. This one kind of also was under the radar, but stuck out to me. I don't want to talk anymore about Joe Biden. Hopefully this is the last time. But on January 19th, the last day the full day that Biden was president, the Conference of Grand Masters of Prince Hall Lodge Freemasonry stated that the Grand Lodge of South Carolina had granted a resolution of membership to him, to Joe Biden. So I don't know exactly what this means. Does this mean that Biden is now a Freemason? If he is, then he is once again conflicting with his supposed Catholic faith, which condemns Freemasonry and is forbidden to Catholics, but what's new there? It also condemns and forbids abortion. I'm reading from a piece by Ed Condon at The Pillar, which is a Catholic, is a Novus Ordo Catholic journalistic website. The ban on Catholics joining the Freemasons is centuries old and is recognized by the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith as both a crime and a grave sin. But there are some things we don't know about Biden's situation, even after the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of South Carolina had said that on January 19th, at a private event, Master Mason membership with full honors were conferred upon Joe Biden, who now has the rank of Master Mason. The lodge announcement says that the membership was conferred on Biden by the lodge, not that he went through any Masonic liturgies. That might seem like a question of formalities, but it could actually make a big canonical difference. For a start, it is not clear to what extent Biden accepted, formally or informally, membership of the lodge, or if it was merely presented to him as something they did for and to him. Pictures of the event show the president shaking hands and embracing the head of the lodge, but not receiving any certificate or physical representation of membership. It goes on, simply put, if Biden didn't actively do anything to join the Freemasons or accept his membership, it's reasonable to conclude that he did not violate the relevant canon, which, in accord with canonical principles, must be interpreted strictly. Well, again, I don't know how much it matters. I kind of had hoped not to think of Joe Biden again after the inauguration of President Trump. But interesting. If I had been president and were contacted by members of the Freemasonic Lodge saying I had an honorary Master Mason title, I would heartily and formally denounce it. And Biden, as a theoretical Catholic, should have also, I think. But, yeah, so, we hit Nazis and racism. Let's hit the Freemasons also, shall we? Moving on. One of the executive orders Trump signed on his first day was a memorandum that ordered agency heads to make federal workers return to their offices, presumably from working at home like they had been doing since COVID. One interesting thing to note on this is that the headquarters of most federal departments have occupancy levels below 25%, some in the single digits. What this means is that the government, and therefore the taxpayer, are paying for these big buildings and all their utilities and the rent and all that stuff for basically no one. Great use of taxpayer funds as always. But anyway, the interesting thing about this executive order is that any workers who do not want to come back to office, the Office of Personnel Management has made an offer. Those workers can resign by February 6th and receive full pay and benefits through September 30th. So what is that, 8 months, basically, severance? So this is a really smart and will likely be a very effective way to cut the size of government, basically by incentivizing people to resign. And as anyone who works in the private sector or has gotten laid off know, this is a very generous offer. I work at a large manufacturing company and we had layoffs a little bit ago. And for the older people or people who had been there a long time, they actually offered a fairly significant severance package. It was, basically 2 weeks of paid time for as many years as you had worked for the company. And that in itself was very effective for reducing the number of forced layoffs by encouraging people who were already thinking maybe of retiring soon or wanted to get out anyway to have motivation to do so. So this is that on steroids. This is 8 months of severance. I might just take that straight up right now. I could find another job in 8 months. Anyway, no one is saying these people can't work from home. And if they really want to keep working from home, they have 8 months with full pay and benefits to find a new job that allows it. And, they won't be working from home on the taxpayer's dime. So yet another stroke of executive order brilliance from Trump. Let's finish off the week by talking about an underreported executive order. This one is called Expanding Educational Freedom and Opportunity for Families. This is fantastic, and I would argue maybe one of the most important executive orders that has come through. Again, as we discussed last week, it would be great if this got through the legislative body and became law, but in the short term, we'll take our wins where we can get them. I'm going to read some snippets here. Parents want and deserve the best education for their children. But too many children do not thrive in their assigned government-run K-12 school. It talks about how public schools have been failing to teach students how to read and do math. When our public education system fails such a large segment of society, it hinders our national competitiveness and devastates families and communities. For this reason, more than a dozen states have enacted universal K-12 scholarship programs, allowing families, rather than the government, to choose the best educational setting for their children. Policy. It is the policy of my administration to support parents in choosing and directing the upbringing and education of their children. The rest of the order goes through what the Secretary of Education has to do within the next 60 to 90 days to start implementing this. School choice is one of those topics, to me, that is more fundamental than most of the political things we discuss. Abortion is obviously one, because that so directly corresponds to the life portion of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and just the straight-up evil and immorality of murdering your children. The Second Amendment is a big one for me. It's the amendment that keeps all of the other amendments and freedoms we have around, right? If we don't have the ability to defend ourselves and our freedoms, then they can be taken away from us. School choice is a generational game changer in politics. Right? Was it Lenin that said, "Give me your children and I will give you the communists of tomorrow"? Have we not seen that in the last several generations with the American public school system? I would argue one of the only reasons that the progressive left has gone so far, and things like this trans ideology and everything else has gone so completely nuts, could only have happened with a generation or two or three of people who have been brainwashed by that public school system and the things that are taught in it. So freeing our society from these generations of bad teachers, and getting to a point where parents, who always want the best thing for their children, have the choice on how to educate them, is a very fundamentally important thing to do. Imagine 3 generations from now, where even if only half of the children that would have gone to public schools are now homeschooled or in private schools with better curriculum, not learning terrible things. How much better that society will be, stacked upon itself. How much better would this country's future be without the Department of Education? I think what this executive order does is it starts, as many of the other states have done, starts giving the states more power in how we educate our children, but even more importantly, going down to that nuclear family level and letting the parents of children decide where and how they get schooled. So, exciting as always. Again, it's an executive order. It would be better if it were a law while we have the House and Senate, but we will take our wins where we get them. That sound means we're all out of time for today. Please like, share, and subscribe to The Traditionalists, and don't forget to ring that bell. And spread the word, whether for my show Trad Takes or for any of the other shows hosted by The Traditionalists. Remember to leave a comment. It might well be the one I pick to read and react to next week. This is Eric signing off. God bless you all, and God bless these United States of America.